Our next technique is obscure sword. And again, as the name would indicate, it is very similar in terms of attack to obscure wing. So here in this case, it's also potentially an advancement or change or variation to the type of attack that we would have experienced in sword and hammer on yellow belt. Sword and hammer on yellow belt being the fact that I'm potentially being pulled into a punch off to my flank. So in doing so, I step and I use my sword, my longer range weapon, to prevent that. Obscure wing, as we've already said, is potentially the person is directly behind me, so I cannot step out and hit that. So I step to my left in this case. And by stepping to my left, I open my targets for my rear elbow, my hammer, and my obscure wing at that stage. Obscure sword then, again, is a very similar grab. It's going to be that grab on the shoulder, and I'm going to reach across as I always do. Once I reach across as I always do, I'm going to then essentially respond to what comes next. And in my thoughts on this, it is potentially that you are being driven forward by this flank. So instead of being pulled or trapped off from behind, you're now having the forearm plus the grab being used to drive you forward. In doing so, then you're keeping that pin as we've done in the past, and we're stepping to 1 o'clock. So in stepping to 1 o'clock, which I'm going to do from this angle, now what's happening is I'm being pushed off base. But rather than being pushed off base to fall forward, I'm being pushed off base and I'm going to adjust my angle to take myself off that line of pressure. Once I do that, I'm going to come back to a neutral, and here is my obscure sword coming up. So potentially I'm coming up at a line of obscurity to that person, or angle of obscurity to that person. I'm going to hit into the throat, and then from here, I'm going to deliver that left thrust kick. That can be to the groin, or that could be to the stomach or another target such as solar plexus, depending on how the person reacts, of course. Groin being probably the most easy target to hit at that stage. So the idea here is if I'm being pushed forward, I'm potentially stabilizing on that angle. As I stabilize, I'm now turning in. So having maybe stabilized, I might have pulled that person slightly forward, bringing the throat forward, which means I can now turn and I can hit that chop, or that outward hand sword in this case. From here then, once I've hit this from my neutral, I can then hit my kick to the groin, check, and leave.